Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Pit Strategy Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff, along with my co-host, Matt.
Hello.
And we just want to welcome you to Happy New Year and a Merry Christmas to all of our listeners around the globe, wherever you are. We're just excited for episode 2 here. Obviously, the 2024 Formula One season hasn't started yet, so we're basically covering all of the off-season action, the silly season.
Just trying to keep ourselves as sated as possible.
Try not to lose sanity. You can only play so much esports F1 without having a real race.
It just doesn't tickle that itch.
It really doesn't. So here we are recording this on New Year's Day. We've got roughly, 60-something days, 64 days until Bahrain?
64 too many, but yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And technically it starts earlier than that with the preseason testing.
Right,
winter testing. They'll be out
which I am very, very looking forward to.
Right. I think it's going to be an interesting start to the season.
A lot of eyes on some previously lower tier teams like Williams, for example.
Yeah, and Alfa Romeo have jumped the gun and said, hey, we're announcing new cars before everybody else, which has been very, very interesting. So
they've been very ambitious over the winter break.
They have been very ambitious. A lot of social media hype, one team having an entire name change and all this kind of stuff. So
and more to come.
Yep. So, without further ado, we'll get into it. All right, and this section is the dispatch, and we're going to start off with probably the biggest controversy to come out of the the off season.
The week-long controversy.
It felt longer than that.
It did. Every single day there was just this anticipation of, is anybody going to say anything? And it just nothing came of it.
Nothing came up, and we're specifically talking about the Susie and Toto Wolff controversy with the FIA. For those of you who haven't followed it closely or been out of the loop, an accusation was made due to Susie Wolff's involvement with, employment with the Formula One management group as she handles the Formula One women's division, the F1 Academy, due to her being married to Toto Wolff, the team principal of the Mercedes F1 team. There was an accusation made in the press that she, by merit of her position, might have access to internal Formula One documents that she could have passed on to her husband, giving Mercedes an unfair advantage going into the next season. Now, both Susie, Toto, and the entire Formula One organization, Mercedes, FIA, all came out and said these were categorically false. But that didn't stop the press from pretty much going ballistic over it. All of the teams released a exact same worded statement saying that they were not responsible for raising these allegations, but
it was very much a copy-paste scenario amongst all the F1 teams.
It really was. It was kind of scary. It was almost like a coordinated effort.
For real, the biggest difference between each of the team statements is it going to be one paragraph or two?
Right. And the FIA came out and announced that they were going to launch an investigation into it, and that's what led to the week-long saga. And at the end of it, they found there was no wrongdoing, nothing out of the ordinary, but it did seem to taint some of the reputation for the Wolves, unfortunately, which is sad.
It is sad, and for me personally, my biggest, I don't know, the biggest highlight for me was the difference between Susie's statement and Toto's, because Susie came out almost immediately with a very emotionally worded statement.
Sure.
Which, there's nothing wrong with that at all. There were a lot of words thrown around, I think misogyny was one of the words brought up, and I think that's more rooted in the fact that she's involved with F1 Academy.
Right.
More than anything else. And I don't know, I think she jumped the gun on making a statement because it was almost the same day.
Right.
Whereas Toto, I think Toto's statement seemed much more like he went to a board or like a PR department and say, what do we do? Versus Susie just almost typing that herself. Right. That's what it seemed like to me. Because Toto's was a lot more, I don't want to say corporate or cold, but it was much more planned out, I think.
Right.
They waited. It was much shorter, much more to the point. And yeah, it wasn't emotionless, but it was more professional, in my opinion.
Sure. I mean, he's the CEO of Mercedes Petronas F1 team and all that. So I mean, they have a communications department that does all of that. And as a team principal, I'm sure he had to toe the line of, having to play that dual role of CEO, team principal, and also husband at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's a delicate line to walk. I just think it was interesting the level of involvement that a lot of people in F1 got into with it. All of the teams, I mean, other team principals seemed to make a big deal about it. With nothing other than just a story run of the press. There was no actual evidence that was at least brought forward,
Right. No.
which I thought was interesting. And it'd be one thing if Toto had been caught red-handed with some sort of document or something,
For sure,
or someone in the Mercedes organization had seen something.
Yeah.
But nobody was coming forward. There was no,
Because there was no identified whistleblower or anything like that, right?
not that I've heard.
Yeah,
No.
me neither. So it's just somebody had the idea, which the possibility is definitely there because of what their jobs are.
Sure, there's there's a potential conflict of interest there.
For sure. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There was no evidence confirmed, nothing brought to light that said this is substantiated. This is true.
Right.
So yeah, just a bunch of wind.
Yeah, but it definitely hogged the F1 news cycle for a good week.
Yeah.
And I think the FIA's investigation was correct. I don't think, like I said, because no evidence was brought forward, I don't think it was as big a deal as the press was making it. I think people are just, the season was over, let's keep Formula One in the news,
Right. Talk about an awkward Christmas for the Wolves.
Oh, absolutely. And the whole Mercedes team, I'm sure.
For sure, yeah.
Back at the factory, things were like, did you talk to the press? No. Did you talk to the press? No.
A lot of closed door meetings.
Oh, I'm sure. It
in
would have
the
been fun.
Mercedes factory.
Would have been fun to be a fly on the wall in those conference rooms.
For real.
All right, so moving around the horn, we'll go on to the next biggest thing that's kind of been buzzing around. What is the status of Ferrari drivers' contracts? At the start of the season, it seemed like Leclerc was going to be offered a record 5-year, multi-million-dollar deal, and then Sainz was going to get almost shortchanged with a 1-year contract.
And now, looking at the end of the season, overall, Leclerc has performed better. But who has the only win for Ferrari this year?
It's Sainz.
It's Sainz. So they almost break out even.
They really do.
So yeah, as Ferrari, what do you do?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting dynamic between the two of them going into this next year because Ferrari's team principal, Fred Vasseur, has indicated that for 2024, there is no preferred driver. Some teams have a preferred driver for a certain strategy style or whatever, but Ferrari's going to give both drivers the same car, the same equipment, the same upgrade packages. No special treatment for one or the other.
And based on this past season, I think that's the right call.
I would agree. I mean, they performed well. Leclerc took a crazy number of pole positions, even though he didn't convert them. Sainz took the only race win that wasn't a Red Bull win. And aside from technical issues, I mean, obviously they had gearbox troubles, and Leclerc did not start in Brazil, which was tragic. But driver qualities combined, I think they both deserve long contracts. I don't know if 5 years for Leclerc.
5 may be a little too generous.
I feel it's a stretch.
Yeah, just a little. I feel like, I mean, for one thing, Ferrari is really gassing up their new car for 2024.
Correct.
So I think it's smart to, just let both of them drive, let them ride for at least half a season to see how they do with this new car, and then reevaluate contracts.
Exactly. Yeah, I would agree. I would say, sign them for a 2 to 3 year deal with options to, let them go free agent or,
Right.
Obviously Ferrari has a driver academy that they can cycle from, and I feel like that would be something that needs to be evaluated. But yeah, signing Leclerc to a firm 5-year deal seems a bit much. But you also don't want to lose Sainz. I mean, you sign that man to a 1-year deal. If he's not happy, he's going to jump. And
sure,
you're
definitely.
going to lose some serious talent.
Yeah, and like we've talked about before, strategy on the side of Ferrari is really going to play into this whole ordeal, because if they can't get their act together, then definitely the drivers are not going to be happy, and they're going to probably jump ship.
Yep. And that's a hard place to sit in the middle of the year. I mean, talked to McLaren about that after they, had the debacle that cost them Daniel Ricciardo, and the other teams have struggled.
And then Alpine with Oscar Piastri, very similar deal.
Yep, same song, second verse.
Yeah, and on the flip side, I mean, if Leclerc can't, rein in this new car, or if Carlos just happens to forget how to be smooth, there's always Robert Schwartzman.
That's true, and he performed very well at the the rookie run at Abu Dhabi at the end of the season.
He did, yeah.
And I'd have to go back and look, but I think Ferrari also signed like 2 or 3 new junior drivers for F3 in the offseason.
For their feeder series, yeah.
Yeah, so that their driver academy is packed.
Right.
So they've got a deep bench of people that they can start running up through the ranks. So I think a 5-year contract for any driver in Ferrari is ridiculous. But 1 year I think is too short. Somewhere in that happy medium is I think where they need to end up.
Yeah, sure.
And speaking of McLaren and other teams, one of the other big things that I feel came out of the last couple of weeks was the changing temperature from various Formula One teams regarding Andretti Racing.
Yeah.
On our last episode, we discussed what that would look like, and at that time, the attitude from the teams was very cold. It was basically a no, heck no.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care how much money you want to throw at us, no.
No girls allowed.
Yes. Yeah, no Americans allowed after Haas. Like, it was this very staunch no. But McLaren boss Zach Brown changed his tune pretty fast. Obviously McLaren has quite a history in IndyCar and all of that kind of stuff. They have a pretty warm relationship with American racing. So
yeah.
It's not surprising that they would be the first one to change their tune. But the big one that kind of surprised me was Alpine. That kind of indicated that they would be open to Andretti coming on board if they if they would use Renault engines.
Yeah, Renault is not the worst engine to pick.
True.
Especially, Alpine has clearly proven that they can make it work.
Sure.
However, I don't know how confirmed everything is between Andretti and General Motors being their engine provider. So there'd be a lot of American pride to have an American team with an American engine provider in F1. Now, is that going to draw in more F1 fans? Jury's still out, I think.
Sure.
I think that's going to be more of a media thing.
Yeah.
So...
And I'm sure it's a sponsorship thing. I mean, General Motors would, I think, love nothing more than to have, the Chrysler branding all over that.
Oh, sure.
That Andretti car, should it make its debut into F1. But, like you said, at the same time, I think it's going to be iffy. I don't think the brand loyalty is there in Formula One towards anything Chevy.
Sure.
So it's going to be iffy. And like you said, I mean, there's already we have another engine manufacturer coming online in 2026 with Audi.
Yep.
Going to be providing engines to Sauber.
Right. So, yeah, I don't think having Renault engines in an Andretti would not be the most far-fetched scenario out there. But I don't know. I think Andretti would be wise to keep their options open right now, not commit to anything yet.
Sure.
Wait to see if they get some more offers from other teams.
Sure.
Because, like you said, this is only the second team to really offer anything as far as support goes.
Sure.
It's still early.
True, and it also is going to very much depend on how much development has gone into the Andretti car already. If they've already built an entire system around a Chrysler, Chevrolet engine, some GM product like that, it's going to be really hard to cause them to go back to the drawing board to have to retune everything for a Renault.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's probably why Andretti's been kind of silent on it, because maybe they don't want to tip their hand as to how far their development is.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, they haven't even been given a green light to enter Formula One yet anyway, so
yeah.
to be determined.
Yeah.
Definitely an interesting one. And speaking of new teams and new nomenclatures and denoms that are out there, how about those new team names? As of today, we no longer have Alfa Romeo Stake F1 team on the grid. It's now F1 Stake F1 team. Just that's it.
Yep.
That's the joke. The team, formerly known in ages past as Sauber, the Swiss automotive company, racing team. They dropped Alfa Romeo, and they will become Audi in 2026. But until then, they've decided to adopt the
It's just Stake F1.
Stake F1, which is also funny because for those who don't know, Stake is a online gambling outfit similar to like DraftKings or whatnot, which are banned in Switzerland where the team is based.
Right. It's just a lot of hilarity.
There's a lot of hilarity. The internet comments were not kind. They were not.
I mean, we made our fair share of jokes on our story today.
Oh, absolutely. And I think those were warranted. If I had to say so. But then even on top of that, we've got AlphaTauri. They officially registered with the FIA as Scuderia AlphaTauri, but apparently they have the right to change that up until the first race, I believe. And they are apparently floating that they will have a potential name change this week.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, changing the branding on a car is not hard to do.
No, it's really not.
So,
especially when you're Red Bull's junior team. I mean, you can just...
Yeah, they have all the time in the world.
Yeah, it's just copy and pasting of a Bull logo somehow.
Right, yeah. Basically, that's what Racing Bulls was.
yeah, and the internet didn't like that one either.
Yeah, rightfully so, in my opinion. And we mentioned this before, but Stake, to anyone over at Stake listening, if you happen to get a podium at any point in the season this year, you are obligated to swap out the champagne for a bottle of A1 sauce.
Absolutely.
You have to do this.
Yeah. And then at that point, you stop referring to it as a grid. It's now a grill.
It's a grill.
Just a must at that point. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. And I don't think I'm going to refer to it as Stake F1. They're just going to always be Sauber.
Yeah, I mean, Alfa Romeo to me personally, but yeah, Sauber just sounds better than Stake. Better.
If somebody wanted to launch a line of just straight up Sauber merch, I would buy a shirt. I would buy a hat just to throw it in the face.
Just to make the statement.
just to throw it in the face of these ridiculous gambling outfits that just want their name on a card.
Yeah.
All right, coming up next, we're going to roll into the forecast. Obviously, we're still in the off season. The 2024 season has yet to begin, so we've got teams rolling into winter testing coming up here pretty quick. What do we know so far? We've got Ferrari have announced that they're going to be running debuting their new car on Valentine's Day, which will be definitely fun for the Ferrari fans in the house. I vote present. And then after that, we've got Williams here in a week, 2 weeks, something like that.
Something pretty soon.
Yeah, pretty soon. Sauber as well. They've announced that they're going to be debuting their cars, but as of that, nobody else has announced a actual launch date for a car. We've gotten a little bit of news from the factories. Red Bull failed their crash test, as did Alpine, the FIA mandated crash test, which apparently you were saying isn't unheard of.
It happens more often than you think. And
Really?
It mostly has to boil down to the factories making the most efficient car with the FIA restrictions as possible. And then testing it, it fails this crash test, and then they reel it in a little bit until it can pass this crash test.
Gotcha.
So that's just competition for you.
Gotcha.
That's just them trying to make the best car that they possibly can, and then realize, it's a little too much. And
overpromise, underdeliver type thing, and then you just kind of dial it back in.
You basically, you make the very, very best car you possibly can. It exceeds what the FIA wants from you, and you dial it back.
Interesting. I would love to read some of those test reports.
That's what yeah.
And see, I don't know, some slow motion footage would be fun. If anybody from the Red Bull or Alpine teams are happening to listen to this, leak the cut. Put it on YouTube. We want to see. I want to see, carbon fiber and, fiberglass just go shattering at a bazillion miles an hour in a wind tunnel or something.
Please.
We're that bored in the off season. Let's be real.
For real. Yeah, we need something. Give us anything.
But yeah, other than that, we don't have a whole lot of news about what's going to be debuted during winter testing. Most of the teams have been pretty quiet. Mercedes apparently started their engine on the test stand, and we're impressed with the results. But other than that, we don't really know anything else.
Yeah, but didn't they say that last year to an extent?
They probably did. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Typical Mercedes thing, getting the good press out there.
It's all a psyop.
Mercedes Playbook 101.
Yep.
But yeah, other than that, nothing much for winter testing. The only other real news in the off-season from a track or layout perspective is talk about a new Madrid Grand Prix coming out, which will they haven't announced whether it's going to replace Barcelona or run in tandem with Barcelona, if it's going to be added as an additional track to the F1 calendar. But they are. I think in several years going to debut the Madrid GP, which is going to be going around the Real Madrid soccer team stadium and all kinds of downtown areas. It will be a street circuit, obviously.
It's slated for 2026.
2026. So yeah, that'll be coming up here really, really quick. I don't know. Looking at the layout, I'm not a huge fan of street circuits myself personally.
Yeah, neither am I. Just because you're limited by the available streets.
Correct.
Which can make for some really interesting corners, but also some really dumb ones. One in particular for this track, the roundabout.
The roundabout. There's a right-hand turn around a roundabout in the middle of downtown Madrid. I don't see that being done well. It's not a traditional chicane. It's a bit of a weird
It's
thing.
not impossible. It's no different than the famous hairpins from Monaco, honestly.
That's true.
I think you could take it even a little bit faster than those hairpins.
That's true.
However, I know, me personally, being an old NASCAR fan here, there are a lot of people that just want to see somebody Dukes of Hazzard that thing. Just
go airborne.
Just Francesco Virgolini that thing. Just forget it's there. See how far we can yeet that F1 car. But yeah, I don't think it's a safety concern. I just think it's not going to be the most efficient turn out there. Yeah. It'll be entertaining for sure. It'll be either very entertaining or very boring, depending on how the drivers take it.
Yeah, also true. It'll be one of those things where I'm sure there will be a stat, at the beginning of an F1 broadcast. They talk about, years ago, these two drivers duked it out on this track, and here's all the stats of, who holds the track record here for the fastest lap time and all these kinds of things. There'll also be someone who takes the fastest turn around that roundabout without crashing. And then with crashing, there'll be quite a highlight reel of wipeouts for that track.
I'm sure, yeah.
So would you rather have the new Madrid Grand Prix, or would you rather them keep Barcelona?
I like Barcelona.
I do too.
It's a fun track to race on simulators. So I don't know. At the very least, keep Barcelona while trying at Madrid, and see how it plays out. I think it's really gonna come down to how Madrid is accepted. Very much how Vegas had its debut.
Sure.
This past season, it's gonna come down to how the drivers like it. It's gonna come down to fan reception. And, just execution for the event, because all the practices leading up to the Las Vegas Grand Prix were hit with a lot of scrutiny. Between the times that they had it, some of them were like 1, 2 in the morning for some American viewers.
Sure.
You had the manhole fiasco for Carlos Sainz.
Right.
But the race itself just about went off without a hitch.
Yeah.
You had Lando Norris's accident, which is, that's racing for you.
That can happen anywhere.
It can happen anywhere. And yeah, the race itself was pretty well received. So yeah, it's just take all that and apply it to this new Madrid Grand Prix, and you're going to have to apply those same kind of criteria.
That makes sense. I think I agree with you. I think it's if the people in Spain want it enough, if the city of Madrid welcomes it and turns out for it and all that kind of stuff, I think it has the potential to be as good as Vegas, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you are going to keep Barcelona and bring Madrid on and drop another street circuit off the calendar, who would you sacrifice for Madrid? What track is not worthy enough to share a calendar slot with a Madrid Grand Prix?
All right, so my personal unrealistic opinion is going to be to drop Monaco. I know, I'm going to be hated for this. I know Monaco has a lot of history in motorsport and in F1. I respect that, I really do, but it's just not a good modern F1 track. I'm sorry. So I'm just going to get that out of the way right now. My realistic answer to that question, it's a little tougher. It'd be really easy to throw Vegas under the bus.
Sure.
I think it deserves a couple more years just to prove itself as a street circuit.
I would agree with that.
So with that in mind, probably Baku.
I was going to also say
I'd probably
Baku.
pick Azerbaijan.
Yeah. Baku, it's a great layout for a track. It's a great idea. But it's too narrow, and it's too, in my opinion, it's too similar to Monaco as far as your racing strategy because it's so narrow.
It's very narrow. You have to have a high downforce strategy.
Correct.
And yeah, there are some redeeming qualities to that track, like it's front straight, for
Right.
example. It's a very long straight. There's a lot of overtaking opportunities there, but that's about it. The rest of it is very narrow. There's a lot of slow turns to it where not much else happens.
Sure.
Except for, Leclerc and him being stupid. But
Also true. Yeah, I don't know. Looking at the calendar, there's not a ton of street circuits that I don't necessarily like, just for the sake of not liking them. But yeah, I definitely think Baku is definitely the leading contender to get dropped, in my opinion, as far as a street circuit goes.
I agree. It's always going to be unfortunate when a track gets dropped. But yeah, that would have to be my pick too.
Yeah. And definitely with the new car regs coming up, they're going to get narrower. Am I correct? So it's going to be one of those things of you're going to have these more narrow cars that you're just going to have more drivers going to try to go 3 wide in tight areas where they really can't. And I just foresee a ton of accidents happening there if you were to keep that. So yeah, I would drop Azerbaijan for a Madrid Grand Prix as well. I don't know if I agree with you on the Monaco statement. Yes, it's obnoxious, but it is this crucible of anything that can go wrong in an F1 race usually goes wrong in Monaco.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It makes for fun watching. I can see it. I can see the drivers and the teams, maybe wanting to ditch Monaco, but as a fan, I think it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it is fun to watch from that standpoint, but me personally, I like to watch racing for the sake of seeing the drivers race each other, and that just doesn't happen that often in Monaco.
That's true. Yeah, especially since the coastal conditions of Monaco lend itself to a lot of rain and a lot of just adverse conditions.
That's what happened this past season. So,
Correct. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Madrid if it comes online, if it stays and has the staying power, and if the people of Madrid welcome it.
And if we keep 2 Spanish drivers on the grid, then there's going to be a lot of traction.
I would agree. Absolutely, they do seem to love Carlos and Fernando quite a bit.
Yeah, fingers crossed Fernando stays for 2026.
It's not a talking point, but how many years do you think we have left with Fernando?
I'm trying to think. He's 42 right now.
I believe so.
42, 43. So I mean, 2 or 3 more at least. I think.
Interesting.
Like we said last time, he has shown no signs of going anywhere. He's shown no intention of wanting to stop.
He's still competitive.
He's still physically fit. I mean, he made that point in Bahrain.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon.
Do you expect him to stay with Aston Martin?
Ooh. I mean, definitely at least first half of the season. That's already confirmed.
Sure.
So, if a better opportunity presents itself, if I were Nando, I would definitely take it.
Yeah. Because they entered contract negotiations between Alonso and Aston Martin today.
Right.
It was announced. So they're clearly trying to keep him.
They're trying to keep him, and I don't blame them for trying to keep him. And it's not like Stroll's been in his way on track, per se.
Sure.
So
they're not fighting each other.
They're not fighting each other. He's clearly the number one. And, I mean, I would be comfortable with that if I were him. But I think from an organizational standpoint, if a better opportunity were to come up, I'd say, this is huge, very much hypothetical, but, Red Bull or Ferrari.
Sure.
Maybe not Ferrari. Just a place that has a bit more structure and discipline when it comes to their drivers.
Right.
I mean, I would probably take that if I were Fernando.
Yeah, I mean, the man has a illustrious history with some of the best teams in Formula One history.
Exactly, and he's got nothing to lose.
He does. So it's definitely his game to play, his ticket wherever he wants to go, because he's a 2-time world champion.
Yep.
So you don't just dismiss a 2-time world champion out of hand. You pay the money to get that man if he's interested in coming to your team.
Exactly.
All right, and with that, we're going to roll into the traffic report. This is our segment dedicated to just things that are just like tangentially related to Formula One, maybe not Formula One specific, but just in the area, things that have caught our attention. Biggest thing that kind of led me off was the Mercedes Project One hypercar that they just conveniently just decided to announce a few weeks ago. And for those who don't know, there's a 1 minute long video on Mercedes's YouTube page kind of debuting it. But it's Lewis Hamilton's Formula One car from 2014. All the guts from that car tucked into a supercar style, Le Mans style package that is street legal. They're only making 100 of them. They've already been bought and paid for. It's supposed to be delivered sometime at the end of this year. But yeah, it's the first instance of a Formula One car being set loose to the public on the street.
Right, because we've seen some project cars of just somebody making an F1 looking car in their garage.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool that they're taking genuine F1 product and putting it on the street.
Yeah, the actual engine, the suspension, all of the components that led Lewis Hamilton to back-to-back championships in a car that you could literally go throw down a check for and go buy yourself.
Yeah, which is really cool. And it wouldn't surprise me if 1 or 2 driving experience companies do everything possible to get their hands on one of those.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just to say, hey, this is it. Come on, take a drive. Pay us while you're at it.
Who do you think is going to be the first person to wreck one?
Oh, to wreck one? Oh, boy. Ooh, that's tough. Who was that guy that bought that one car from Lewis Hamilton and just wrecked it immediately?
It's some British celebrity, I think.
Oh, man. Yeah, your guess is as good as mine on that.
How long do you think it will be before somebody wrecks it?
2 weeks, tops.
Yeah, somebody gets into it, thinks it's going to handle like their Porsche or a Corvette, and it's an entirely different animal.
Yeah. On that same note, have you seen the Aston Martin Valkyrie?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not F1, but it's got a lot of those same engineering aspects thrown into there. It's got an ERS for crying out loud.
Right.
Which I don't know if you saw I don't know if it was really a test drive or more of a promo drive that they put out for it. But the guy driving it overdid it on the ERS. He was trying to push it 8 times a lap. And no, once a lap. That's all you get.
It's not a Tesla. It doesn't have just this unlimited battery range.
Right. But I'm glad that there's that much attention to detail being put in more street cars these days.
Oh yeah, especially in the hypercar, supercar world. I don't know. I feel like everybody wants to reinvent the wheel with a hypercar. You've got these Bugatti Veyrons that, crazy
V12 engine.
Yeah, V12 engines that are
V60.
putting out 1,000+ horsepower. And I'm like, an F1 engine pretty much does that. Why are we reinventing the wheel and making these things look ridiculous when the F1 technology is there? The F1 aerodynamics are there. These are all, especially the older years. These are things that are highly detailed and are, I'm sure, incredibly fun to drive.
Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel. Just add to it.
Just add to it.
Yeah.
Don't reinvent the wheel. Add 3 more and a steering wheel, and you're good to go.
Genius.
Yep. And then after that, we deliberately timed our recording of this podcast to coincide with us just watching the new Adam Driver Ferrari movie.
Yes, we did.
And that was something.
Yeah. I think you and I both went into the theater with the mindset of this being a racing movie.
Right.
A movie about cars racing one another. And it had that, but it was clearly not the focus of the plot.
Right.
It was very much more a not a biography, but it was much more of a interpersonal drama.
Yeah, interpersonal drama about Enzo, his life, his personal life outside of the Ferrari factory. And while, I mean, I'm sure that is a interesting story to some, the way the trailer pitched it was definitely more of a racing movie. When it only had what, maybe a quarter of the actual racing of, say, Ford versus Ferrari or any other modern racing film.
The movie itself was about 2.5 hours long, and I don't think racing footage accounted for even 30 minutes of it.
Right, it was a bit of a disappointment for a film stylized as Ferrari and all of the speed that comes with that name. It was an incredibly slow film.
Yes, so if you're a gearhead or a speed freak, this movie is not for you.
Yeah, definitely something to maybe put on in the background to fall asleep to, but not worth, I would say, the money to go see it in theaters. Certainly not worth buying, Prime Blu-ray DVD editions for it.
Yeah, just have a Prime membership and wait for it to get on that.
Yep, exactly. Props to Adam Driver. He played the role fantastically well.
Adam was definitely the highlight of that movie.
Yeah, he played it fantastically well. He did the dialogue well, but the dialogue was pretty terribly written, in my opinion. The cinematography for everything but the racing was decent, but the actual racing sequences were just terribly filmed.
It was too all over the place.
It was.
It would go from a shot of the bumper for like 2 seconds to the driver's face for way too long, and then back to a wheel hub. It was just bouncing from one thing to another.
And it wasn't stabilized. I mean, obviously a lot of racing footage is not stabilized perfectly, but there was like no attempt to really stabilize it at all. I've seen YouTubers with GoPros and, budget Costco Canon Rebel DSLRs that have done better car footage than these professionals did. It was very much a letdown.
Sure, yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, so yeah, in my book, 3 out of 10, would not watch again.
Yeah, I give it a 4. So
yeah, if you're on the fence, just go watch Ford versus Ferrari or Rush or literally any other car movie. I'm not a Fast and Furious fan, but go watch the Fast and Furious. You'll have a better time, in my opinion. It won't put you to sleep usually.
Right.
All right, and this brings us to our favorite segment of the show, the Tinfoil Hat Party, where we discuss some of the crazy, weird, just conspiracy theory, pie in the sky, wish list things that we have for Formula One, things that may or may not be true, and we just have fun with it.
We do have fun.
We do have a lot of fun with it. Probably too much fun with it.
No.
So,
can you have too much fun? Really?
Too much of a good thing?
I don't believe in that.
Fine. All right, starting up with Alpine leadership changes. They've kept their team principal, but their lead engineer is gone. You also have all of the new owners of the team that have all officially come on board.
How many do they have at this point?
I think there's at least 7 outside investors. When I say outside investors, I'm talking celebrity people who have bought into a fund. This would be Rory McIlroy, Travis Kelce, Ryan Reynolds, Patrick Mahomes, and several others.
Right.
There's a smattering of them.
So it's not publicly owned, but almost.
So the way I understand it, and I reserve the right to be mistaken on this, but it's half owned by the French government. It's a French-owned team because Renault owns it, and Renault is state-owned. But the actual racing team can also have shares purchased as an individual through various funds and whatnot, and that's how all these celebrities have done it. There's a few other investment firms that have bought into it, and as such, they have a say in who team principal is, who engineering is, who even the drivers are. Apparently, they get some feedback on that as a shareholder.
Interesting.
And so, just in my mind, that leads to, I think, one of the more interesting dynamics in Formula One as far as a team structure goes, because like we know with Red Bull, Christian Horner is CEO and team principal. The buck stops with him. If he wants to make a driver change, he makes the change. He doesn't really have to consult anyone.
Sure.
Same with McLaren and Zach Brown. Same with, pretty much any other team. Whoever the team principal is, they make the final call, and the buck stops with them. And that's just what happens.
Which can be really good or really bad.
It can be. And, I mean, there's plenty of history of, a team principal making a decision. Maybe they're inexperienced, maybe the market is not great, and they make some boneheaded driver decisions. But at the end of the day, it's their call, they make it, and it falls on them. And if they fail, they get replaced.
Right.
But with Alpine, you've got this, I don't know, this public forum of F1 leadership almost, full of people who are not maybe necessarily F1 experienced. And what does that do for a team structure?
Again, it can be either really good because it's outside experience that's not really boggled with F1 politics.
Sure.
Or it can be really bad because you have people who either can't make up their minds or have no idea what a good F1 driver looks like.
Sure.
I mean, you can only look at timing sheets so much.
Sure.
A really good example would be Liam Lawson.
Sure.
Did he, was he like on podiums every single time that he raced? No. But he scored his first points, within 2-3 races, whereas Nick DeVries couldn't do that in 10 races.
Right.
So yeah, there's way more than just what's on paper.
Sure. And I think that's going to be interesting because the driver market is there's nobody available on the current grid. I mean, we're keeping the exact same grid from last year. So Alpine doesn't have new drivers really to go grab.
No.
So that means any massive changes are going to come on the car side of the house, the constructor side of the house, which means they've lost their chief engineer.
Right.
So what's that car going to look like in 2024?
And who's going to make that decision?
Exactly. Who's making that call? Who's authorizing? Are we going more top end speed? Are we going for more downforce? What's the upgrade strategy through the year? Because that's got to be planned out way in advance.
Right.
All of these things, and who's making that call with no chief engineer?
Yeah, that's not a good spot to be in.
Not a good spot to be in. I'm worried we're going to see basically probably the same Alpine car from this last year. It's going to be the same car, but no big upgrades.
Probably not.
But it was announced briefly that the Bahrain Sovereign Wealth Fund was looking to 100% buy out McLaren. The entire org. Formula One team, production cars, everything.
Everything. Huh. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
It seems weird to me. Like, it's kind of I don't want to say hostile takeover, because that's not what it is, but it just seems like we're going to force ourselves into the motorsport world entirely, and probably try to use that to dictate terms of, like, if you own a Formula One team, you get a pretty big say in the way Formula One, the future of that is decided. And I can see, if you have a state-owned team like that, and I say this knowing that, Renault, Alpine is a state-owned team. I get that. But, I don't know. It doesn't seem like the French government throws their weight around in Formula One.
Not to that extent.
Not to that extent, but I can see Bahrain, considering that they have a track, and which is also state-owned, I believe, on top of owning a team and all that kind of stuff. Just having a whole lot of undue influence from a state entity in a competitive sport just seems a bit odd to me.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe this is just the guy bleeding red, white, and blue over here, but I don't think that kind of government influence belongs in any kind of competitive scene.
No, I'd agree. Save that for the Olympics.
Right. That's the one exception. Yeah. If that's the case, what's stopping them from doing their own thing?
Right. Well, and I think they've tried that, perhaps. There have been multiple instances where I think, like, especially the Middle Eastern countries and groups out there have tried to do their own racing series and their own things, but they've never gotten a whole lot of traction outside of their own
right,
region.
Because unless I'm mistaken, the motorsport scene in that part of the world isn't huge.
It isn't, especially for Formula One. It's more like rally and that sort of stuff happens out there. But yeah, definitely not the Formula One open wheel type racing.
Right. So yeah, it's just making me raise my eyebrows.
Yeah, it just seems like I feel like that opens up the Formula One world to more national interests. And I don't have anything against Bahrain, but if you do it for Bahrain, then what's to stop, say, the Russians from buying out a team? I mean, we got the whole Russian back stuff from Haas a couple years ago that was kind of iffy in my book.
You could say the Indian Grand Prix had a lot of the similar politics,
Sure.
which is also why we don't have the Indian Grand Prix anymore.
Right.
So yeah, it's a can of worms that's best left closed.
Agreed.
To me.
Yeah, I feel like somebody, and I mean, like I said, this is all very early stages, and I'm sure McLaren being a British-based team, I'm sure their government has rules about who can own certain things and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure it has to go through regulatory approvals like we would here in the States, and I'm sure other countries have similar things.
To those unaware, the Indian Grand Prix was something that was pushed for by a good amount of people within F1 for a while. It happened for a couple of years. Sebastian Vettel won every single race, and then the Indian government demanded a ton of taxes from the F1 teams, from F1 itself, because they considered Formula One as entertainment rather than sport, which caused a whole lot of outcry and downright disgust, honestly, from a lot of the F1 teams, and they just pulled out.
Sure.
So yeah, just let the sport be a sport. Just let them do their thing.
Right, and don't let it be necessarily a platform to push politics. I mean, there's a time and a place to do it, but I mean, we look at F1 has a net zero 2030 policy where they're trying to get carbon neutral by, I think, 2030. Formula E is a huge part of that to basically try to offset, environmental issues and that kind of stuff. Bahrain has in fact, none of the Middle Eastern countries really have a drive to do that. Their entire profit comes from oil. So
right.
They would be kind of diametrically opposed. Is that the right word? Diametrically? Directly opposed to environmental stuff.
Probably not.
Half of the sport. And so it's just underlying things like that where I can just see the Formula One management organization has set itself goals and things that it aspires to be. Women in racing, for example, the Formula One Academy. Most of your Middle Eastern countries don't agree with that standpoint.
Right.
And I could just see that being a big issue. And so it's just all these little things that I could just see if you start opening up teams and who knows what else to, being state-owned to that degree, it just becomes very problematic for the future of the sport.
Do you think that they'll achieve that goal of being zero carbon emissions by 2030?
Probably not. Not to the degree that they want it to be. I mean, we're still running on, oil and gas. I mean, sure, there's an electric component to it, and they're, making all these pledges to be carbon neutral and all that, but you just look at the logistics of what it takes to move Formula One teams around the globe.
Oh, sure.
And all that kind of stuff. There's no way you're making that carbon neutral.
Absolutely.
The race itself might be, the actual cars on the track, but all the background stuff, there's no way.
Yeah,
it's impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, I have nothing against trying to, be more environmentally friendly. But as a racing fan, I want to see these cars be as fast as possible.
Sure.
Regardless of, what's going into them.
Sure.
Go ahead and try to make them as carbon neutral as you can. But it's 20 cars. It's not going to make a dent in the carbon footprint on the planet. But like you said, the transportation for these vehicles would be. And, all the logistics involved in that. So, yeah, it's very much a noble goal. Sure. I'm not against it in any way. I think it's something that should be done, but I think the focus should be more on logistics rather than the cars themselves.
Sure. I mean, it drives innovation. I mean, pushing companies to have greener technology and more environmentally forward-thinking things just pushes, technology. Like we wouldn't have the range that electric cars have if there wasn't a big push for battery cell research and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, sure.
So, it has its place and it drives a lot of innovation there. But when you have a state-run organization whose entire fortune is decidedly built on an industry that is opposed to that just all goes out the window.
I agree.
It's fall by the wayside, and that's just becomes the foundation for other issues. I mean, we see the Middle East have a terrible record with human trafficking, journalistic integrity, fair elections, and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So if they can't even get that stuff done properly, why should they be involved or dictating Formula One procedures and internal politics?
Sure.
I don't know, double-edged sword. I don't find it a beneficial
neither do I.
beneficial involvement at all. And then the next up, kind of also tinfoil hat conspiratorial part. Apparently, somebody leaked that Nico Hulkenberg, currently one of the drivers with the Haas F1 team, has apparently been talks to potentially replace Valtteri Bottas or Zhou Guanyu when Stake F1, aka Sauber, makes their transition to Audi in 2026. Apparently, one of the Audi's big sticking points is they want a German driver on their roster. Apparently, it's a
Get some national pride along
national
with
pride,
Audi on there.
German car manufacturer, German driver.
Okay. I mean, if anyone's going to get replaced, I think it's going to be Zhou Guanyu.
I would agree.
Which leads to the next question of would Hulkenberg and Bottas work well as teammates?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think they're too similar.
I would agree.
They're on pretty similar driver levels.
Yes.
And also on very similar experience levels. So who's going to be number one? Who's going to get the most upgrade packages?
Right.
You have to throw all that into account. Personally, if you are going to take on Hulkenberg, I think it would make more sense to pull in either a rookie driver or a much newer driver along with him.
Sure. That would make sense to me as well. Hulkenberg also has, I think, a little bit of a temper, which has caused him and Magnussen to butt heads and have some stress during their times together at Haas.
Which I think is for the same reason. They're just too similar.
Yeah, they are too similar, yeah. So I think... I don't think you could keep Hulkenberg and Bottas on the same team. Bottas would have to probably go, and I don't think Joe is competitive enough to hold his seat at stake at the moment.
Right. Yeah.
So definitely something to consider. I think the Audi taking over the Sauber team is going to be a very interesting dynamic because while the team has always been there, this is very much a new constructor that has some serious money and serious history in motorsport racing kind of onto the scene. I think it's just going to make for a very interesting upset because honestly, the way it currently stands, I can see the grid as it stands this season carry over into next season again. I don't see the likelihood is there. I think there might be some changes, but I think the actual current roster of drivers, while their team affiliations might change, I think the current drivers will probably stay.
It's a pretty solid lineup, all things considered.
It really is, but you add a whole new constructor in there, and I think that might possibly change some things because they're bringing their own engines. And when you do that, I mean, you traditionally usually have your own driver academy and that kind of stuff, which Sauber I think has.
Right. I mean, Alfa Romeo, that's F1's academy, or no, excuse me, Ferrari's academy.
Right, and so I think it's going to be. I think it's just going to bring an interesting dynamic to the team lineup. So I think it'll be the big shakeup to the grid, and then if again big if Andretti makes it in, that's another big shakeup to it. So I think 2026 is looking to be the big year, probably within the last decade. That's going to really shake up Formula One, based on what I've seen in my limited time watching it. And then this brings up the final part of our tinfoil hat party. The absolute hilarity that was the FIA awards at the end of the season, hosted in Baku in Azerbaijan. Do you want to go over that one? That one was your.
That was there was a lot that went down. My personal highlight was but dude, there was quite a few. But what was the kid's name?
The karting champion?
Yeah, the karting champion.
Just absolutely destroyed Max Verstappen at Mario Kart.
Yes, exactly. That was it. And dude, Max, I feel so sorry for him.
You get this guy who is, a 3-time Formula One world champion, is renowned in the esports simulation racing world, and he gets upstaged by a kid in, a Nintendo Mario Kart battle.
Exactly. And the millennial in me cried a little bit.
Just a little bit, yeah. It was just like, ow. Am I that old?
Yeah, for real. Between that, of course, Oscar Piastri.
Rookie of the Year.
Rookie of the Year. Very well deserved.
Absolutely agree that.
Yeah. So congrats to him for that. There was a lot of almost X-File speculation on whether or not Lewis Hamilton flipped everybody off when he was receiving his award.
I saw that, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? There's a good case for it.
There's a really good case for it, and you combine that with the whole controversy of him leaving his trophy behind.
Yeah.
Which ended up being proven false.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But just all of that happening all at one shot. And just his, I don't know, call it lack of enthusiasm.
He was not happy to be there.
And there's also a part of me that the FIA award ceremony was happening the same week that the Toto Wolff, Susie Wolff controversy was happening. So these are happening during the same week. Mm-hmm. And it makes me wonder if that was just if it was intentional as I'm showing some loyalty to my team. The FIA is screwing over my team principal and his wife. This is Lewis being bros with Toto and Susie, sticking it to the FIA.
Yeah. So, what was that a team order?
Who knows? He probably had an earpiece with Toto in his ear going, yes, do it. Do it. But no, that whole FIA award show was just, it's just weird. Like, it almost seemed like nobody wanted to be there.
There was an air of awkwardness to it.
Super awkwardness. The FIA president was just kind of just walking off stage in the middle of speeches and stuff. And whenever it was time to present a trophy, they couldn't find him.
It was almost like whoever planned the driver introductions for the Vegas Grand Prix was also in charge of organizing the award show.
That's probably the best comparison I can think of. Yeah, because it felt very forced, very awkward. Those poor presenters up there that were trying to do all of this, and the FIA officials are just not cooperating.
Yeah,
it was very weird. You could tell Christian Horner and Max Verstappen, when they took the award for Red Bull for the F1 World Championship, they're just standing up there awkwardly waiting for the president to give them their trophy, and he's just not there.
Yeah, he's just off somewhere else.
Yeah, it was very awkward. You could tell Christian Horner did not want to be there, and I honestly can't blame him. All right, well, I think that'll about round us out for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening and for your continued support. Mm-hmm. We really appreciate it. If you could take a minute and let us know what you thought. We'd love to hear your comments, anything you'd like to hear us cover, any special tidbits, something you want to know more about, drop us a line.
It really helps.
It really does. It really gives us something to talk about during this terribly slow off season.
Barren off season.
Yeah, while we wait for the next 60 days for the next Grand Prix.
We've got some special plans for the next couple of for the days ahead.
Yes, we're going to definitely. Our goal is to try to cover every single Grand Prix in the 2024 calendar. Each race may not get its own episode. We may go back to back depending on our schedules and the schedules of the races. But we want to do that. We want to cover. Just some other fun stuff about Formula One that maybe some people don't know about. We also want to do some F1 23 sim racing, which we're hoping to stream on Twitch in the near future, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, for all future updates and information, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Pit Strategy Podcast. We're also on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. And we're also on YouTube. So yeah, give us a follow there. And like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, anywhere else you listen. Please, it really helps. And we really appreciate all the support from all of our friends and fans around the globe. So, I think that wraps up this episode. Thank you all for listening. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Matt.
Please be sure to follow us on all platforms, and we'll see you all next time. Pit Strategy complete.